So Steve, I'd like to invite you to make a short address if you'd like, and then we'll do a question and answer with the audience if you'd like to think of questions.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. It's a great honour. I know that the invitation came through last year and the date was asked to be October, but unfortunately couldn't make that. 2012 was reasonably a busy year for the UK and me personally. But thank you for bestowing this honour upon me. It's hugely grateful for this, and thank you for allowing me to be here and say a few words. Sorry for the delay coming through the door. As was being introduced, the security guard outside that wanted a photograph. We didn't quite manage to get it in time, but I'm sure he'll grab me on the way out. I did have my photograph with the medal just before, which I wasn't allowed to look at it, but now it has been presented to me. I'm allowed to see it. Now my question is it gold? Why I ask that question is that because the Olympic gold medals aren't. The bronze are bronze, the silver are silver, and the golds are a fake. They're supposed to be silver with gold plate, but there's some doubt about that of some of the medals that I've got over the years. Is the Barcelona one. Over the years that I was competing, they seemed to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the Barcelona one was the sort of biggest at that stage, and it had an implant, and they always said there was 32.5 grams of gold in that. It was very, very soft metal. It was my eldest daughter, who's now nearly 22, she was one when I won that medal, was running around the house with the 3 gold medals I had at that time. And that gold medal has got lots of little dents in it from that soft bit of supposed to be gold. That it started coming unattached, and so I had it sort of re-gilded and reset. And Matthew Pinson's happened a few years later, and they did a little bit of survey on it, and they said there's no gold in the gold medal, and there's no silver either. So that I've got no idea of what metal is in the games. But thank you for bestowing this honour on me. It's fantastic to be here. You all must have fantastic memories, because it was sort of given for my expertise in rowing. Well, it was 12, 13 years ago that I was competing at the Olympics last, which most of you would have been very young at that time. So thank you very much for your memories of when I was actually competing. Obviously 2012 was a fantastic year for the UK and staging the Summer and Paralympic Games. And to be part of that was very, very special indeed. Is that when I was coming up to retirement around 2000, people said to me, you're going to find it really difficult to retire from the sport, because I've been doing it for such a long period of time, 25 years at the highest level. And actually it was pretty straightforward of giving the sport up. But now in hindsight, of looking back over the last 12 years of building up to London 2012 Games, is that I stepped almost immediately in trying to help the country of bid for the Games and being allowed to stage the Games for the 2012. So my life as an Olympian has been right the way through, from almost a 14-year-old through to a nearly 51-year-old as I am now. But when that cauldron went out at the Paralympics, it really did affect me. It did feel that was the end of sort of my Olympic dynasty in some ways, of one as a competitor, one as sort of a journalist, sort of enjoying the aspects of the Games. The Games were absolutely fantastic. I think it's important that a home Games does well, the home country does well at their home Games. And what really sums that up to me is that the 5 Olympics that I competed at, Great Britain won a total of 27 gold medals. In the London 2012 Olympics, Great Britain won 29 gold medals. So that sort of sums up in some ways, of my lifetime of competing, is only just under the amount of gold medals that we won last year at the Games. And it was pretty special from that point of view. The British Olympic Association were very clever of saying that we're hoping that this will be our best Games for 100 years. because that took 1908 out of the equation, where we won 55 gold medals, because there was no way that we were going to ever get back up to that level. 1908 was quite a special games for the UK, because the teams were made up of 2/3 of British competitors. So we had a little bit of a head start on most of the sports. We had sports like tug of war. The tug of war, Great Britain won the gold, silver and bronze. And it was all different police forces from around the country. It was actually the city police that won the gold medal. Liverpool police got the silver, and it was the Metropolitan Police that got the bronze. Tug of war stayed in the Olympics till 3 or 4 games afterwards, and the city police are still reigning Olympic champions in the tug of war. I think they should bring it back. But one of the things I thought about rowing is that we had a great opportunity of overhauling the medal tally that we did get at the 1908 Games, is that we won 4 golds, 3 silvers and 1 bronze. There are 14 Olympic events now. In those days there were only 4. So we won the gold medals in all of them, won the silver medal in 3 of them, and the one that we didn't win the silver medal, we got the bronze in as well. So a pretty good tally of 8 medals there. So what our rowing team did last year of winning 9 medals really sort of does put it into perspective of how good the British rowing team is at the moment. And they are still looking to do even better in Rio. A few of our athletes have retired, but still some of them are still quite keen to go on, and we've got some very good youngsters coming through. So hopefully that of the Rio Games is that my country of Great Britain will still be performing at the highest level. One of my other jobs, other than doing the BBC coverage for the rowing at the Games, was I was one of the ambassadors for Team GB, which was sort of going around of looking after VIP guests, a number of royals, taking them around, seeing sporting events and watching sport. As a volunteer, that's a pretty good job, especially when the tickets were pretty hard to get a hold of the Games. So that was pretty special. But one of my days is that after Great Britain won its first gold medal, which happened to be at rowing the women's pair, is that I was hosting a lunch. And because the racing was in the morning, we won gold, I had to stay around there for a bit longer for interviews before going to host this lunch. I turned up at this lunch a little bit late, just outside the Olympic, or inside the Olympic Park, outside the main stadium. And it was one of our main donors that put a lot of money into the team over the last few years, is that I was hosting him, some of his friends and his family. As I came in, they'd already halfway through their meal and sat down. And cheekily, he leant across the table and he said, I'm a bit disappointed. I'm saying, well, why is that? He says, we were promised the most decorated British athlete. Bradley Wiggins had just won his gold medal literally half an hour before, and had gone past me on a number of medals, not gold medals, but medals at that time. So you think you're sort of up there. There's always somebody ready to knock you down of what you've achieved. Some of the other memories of the Games is that Anne and I have sort of went round and was able to see some of the events of Mo Farah in the 5,000. He'd already won the 10,000, and the atmosphere there was absolutely incredible. Sometimes you go to stadiums and you'll get Mexican waves going around, more of boredom because there's not much happening. The way that I described Mo's race in that 5,000 metres is actually there was a Mexican wave of noise just following the lead group as they were going around. And sitting further up in the stadium as we were, it was pretty impressive to hear this noise going around. Really very, very impressive indeed. In fact, our number 2 from Great Britain actually got lapped. He has now got that photograph of him leading the group as they were coming up to lap him, and that's framed up on his wall. And he's saying in 4 years' time, it's going to be him that's winning the gold. But again, to him, all he remembers is this noise coming from behind him of the crowd of following the group that was catching them up. Of being in the stadium, the velodrome, when Chris Hoy won his 6th gold medal. That was pretty special. Chris is a very good friend of mine, and being there as somebody of taking over the number of gold medals away from me, I couldn't have thought of anybody better than that. But that was pretty special. And then the Paralympics was amazing as well. I didn't get along to see as many events as I did at the Summer Games. But again, Anne and I were in the stadium when David Weir won one of his 4 gold medals when he won the 800 metres, which was the shortest distance that he did. But it was the same day as Johnny Peacock won 100 metres. And that they don't have full starts in athletics anymore. It's supposed to be, if there's a full start, there is a disqualification. So what they have are 40 starts. And actually in this particular race, there were 4 40 starts. And actually Johnny was favourite to win. He was racing his idol, Oscar Pistorius, who's very much in the news today. I won't go there on thoughts because we don't know quite of what's happened there at the moment. But Oscar I do know personally very well, and my thoughts are with the family that the loss has been, and with Oscar and his family as well. But we'll see over the coming days of what happens there. But there's been a number of these faulty starts, and with disability athletes, sometimes it's quite difficult when you've got loss of limb and you're balancing on a little pole to try and keep your balance as you're getting down onto the blocks. Is that Johnny stumbled, and it was a long time before they'd even got set, so there wasn't any problems of being disqualified. But suddenly the whole stadium erupted of chanting his name, Peacock, Peacock, Peacock. And it was just incredible. I've never seen a stadium within the Olympics doing that before. You can imagine of the pressure that's under that athlete as they're getting down on the blocks and ready to compete. But have that pressure on them. My thoughts are thinking, is he going to be able to deal with this? I could feel the sort of the goosebumps on the back of my neck and the hairs standing out on my arms, and thinking, God, what it'd be like to have that pressure on you at that time. The 5th start, they got off really well, and Johnny went to win the gold medal in a fine style. So actually it probably helped him than not. I think probably the best atmosphere of all the things that I went to was the one that I was most surprised at, really, which was the women's boxing. I was with the Princess Royal of going around seeing our medal hopes, and we had Nicola Adams had a great chance of winning gold on that boxing finals. There were 3 women's boxing finals on that day, and Nicola was the first one. And there was a lot of publicity about of how difficult it was to get tickets. I applied for £10,000 worth, and I got 4 tickets, 2 for synchronised swimming, which I'm not proud about telling everybody, but they were for my younger daughter, and my son got 2 tickets for basketball. And that's how I sort of did in the balance. So saved a lot of money, but didn't get the tickets that I wanted to do. Now, one of the things that really surprised me as going into the final of the women's boxing is the whole room, or certainly 90% of the room, were all in green. Absolutely incredible. The hierarchy of Ireland were there. I know some of the sports minister and some of the dignitaries were there, and seeing them before going down to the final. But the Irish atmosphere was absolutely incredible. When Nicola Adams came out for her bout, all credit to the Irish is that just gave a tremendous atmosphere, and it was like the atmosphere of the other stadiums that I'd been to. But when Katie Taylor came out, is that absolutely incredible, and that certainly image will stay with me for the rest of my life. After Katie's bout is that the Princess Royal and a few other British dignitaries moved down to the other side of XL, where Taekwondo was going. We had a great opportunity of a medal there that day, and it was going through the semi-final stage. So we rushed off to go there. As I was coming out of our line, Dara O'Brien was at the end of the line doing some radio commentary. And he said, Steve, you are the king of hugs. You've got to give me a hug. Every time I was seen on the Olympics, I seemed to be hugging somebody of some sort. So I gave Dara a big hug, and then sort of disappeared to go and watch Taekwondo. And I never really gave it a lot of thought from that. And then soon after the games, I was speaking at a school in the UK at Marlborough College, and talked a little bit about my sport, a bit about the Olympics. And at the end of it, instead of, it used to be before mobile phone technology with cameras were out, it was all about signing autographs. Then it's moved to photographs. This had completely changed. They didn't want photographs, they didn't want autographs. They wanted to have a hug from the King of Wales. When you're talking of 14 to 16-year-olds, boys and girls, I'm not quite sure if I was as comfortable as they were with the situation, but a pretty enjoyable time it was. And I actually do have a little bit of history within Irish sport as well, is that my son's godfather set up the Irish bobsleigh team, and I used to be the push start coach for the Irish bobsleigh team. Larry is based in Marlow, which is my hometown, and have you ever seen the film Cool Running of the Jamaicans doing bobsleigh? It was actually the same games. We were a little bit more sort of up the ladder, is that we didn't have a tin tray on wheels that they were pushing. We actually had a proper bobsleigh and a timing system on Larry's drive at Marlow. And we put the sled onto wheels, and we used to practice the push starts going down his drive. So only slightly up from what the Jamaicans were doing, but a lot of fun. And it would have been great to have gone to the Olympics with them and seen them through there. But I don't think my expertise of push starting was that good, so I got dropped very quickly. I think I just wanted to talk a little bit about of my time within the sport, of how getting through to different areas with it, and how your mind thought changes in some ways. Is that I was 14 when I first started the sport, and within weeks of trying the sport, of not actually falling out, because it's pretty difficult to fall out of an 8, but came pretty close to it, of thinking, God, wouldn't it be fantastic of going to the Olympics? And one of my heroes is an American swimmer called Mark Spitz, who I remember as a 10-year-old watching him at the Munich Games, of winning 7 gold medals, and thinking, wouldn't it be fantastic to be able to go to one Games and have the chance of winning a medal? This was 4 years before I found the sport of rowing. And so I think that sort of developed from a dream. I had this dream of trying to be Olympic champion, trying to be the best, trying to win that gold medal. At that time within the UK is that we weren't performing very well on the international stage. We would sometimes pick up a minor medal in some of the events, but certainly not pushing for the gold medals. But I had this sort of inner belief that I potentially could do it. I felt that I could do it once. I was wrong that, because obviously history shows that I did it a little bit more times than just the one time. But having a very clear vision of where you want to be and what you want to achieve. My wife used to row internationally, a silver and bronze medalist at the Commonwealth Games, competed at one Olympics. But she had a very clear vision that she wanted to be a sports doctor, a sports injuries specialist. And all her effort and process went into trying to achieve that dream. She's been at the top of the field for a number of years now, and helping the rowing team on their medical support towards the games. So very much of this clear vision. It doesn't really matter of what form that is that if you know where you want to be, then you've got a great chance of getting there from that point of view. In that time, back in the 70s and early 80s when I started, is our selection process for major championships was based on 9th place. If you could prove yourself as an athlete or your crew better than 9th place, you'd be selected to go to the World Championships, or it was Olympic year, Olympic Games. And it was based on. At that time, that didn't seem to be that crazy in some ways. But if you're trying to be the best in the world, why focus on a lower position? Shouldn't you be focusing on a high position? When Jürgen Grobler came over from former East Germany and started coaching us, he came up with a very different sort of theory in some ways. The training wasn't that much different at that time, but the theory behind it was very much, is that what he came up with gold medal times in all the different events, and that's what time that you had to do to try and win the gold medal in that event. So you might end up coming 9th, 8th, making the final, coming 6th, but you knew of what the gold medal standard was to get to. And some of the times that he set at that time, people said, absolutely ridiculous, there's no way that anybody can go that fast. In the Cox's pair, it was 6 minutes 22. The Kiwis, and the world records at that time was 6:28 over 2,000 metres in the men's Cox's pair. And then the Kiwis at the Games last year did 6:08. So what they felt a few years ago was ridiculous. Now the Kiwis are making it look ridiculous by the time that they've done. So by having this sort of clear vision of where you want to go, and then all our training sessions are worked to a percentage of that, and working towards each training session of narrowing down from that point of view. A great story that I've used a lot over the years actually goes back to those Munich Games. A swimmer, an American swimmer, a guy called John Nabbott. He was part of the American swim relay team that was trying to qualify the team for the final. You're allowed 6 people in a swimming team and 4 that swim the final. So he helped qualify the team, and then people like Mark Spitz, the bigger names, came in and took the gold medal. Now I think that all 6 get the medals if they actually got into the water and swam through the heat or final. In those days it was only the people that swam the final that got the medal. But he was pretty proud of what he did, of helping that team qualify through, and thought that was pretty special. And they thought, well, I'm young enough, I want to try and win that gold medal in 4 years' time. I want to be part of that team in the Montreal Games in 1976. But not just be part of that team, I want to be the individual champion in his individual discipline. His individual discipline was the 100 metres backstroke. And so what he did is he looked back through the history and looked and plotted all the times. And what he found was around the Olympic the year and around that Olympic final, maybe not on that day itself, is there would be a world's best time. The year after the Games, the standard used to drop slightly. The year after that, it would be back up to that Olympic level, maybe slightly above. The year before the new Olympics, there'd be another new high. And then around the new Games, there'd be another new high. And he could draw this graph and predict a time that he felt he had to swim to win that gold medal. Pretty similar to the way that we do it, but swimming is a little bit more of a controlled environment than being out on the water. And so he predicted a time of 55.5 seconds. That's what he had to swim to win that gold medal. The problem was his personal best at that time was 59.5 seconds. He had to find 4 seconds faster swimming on his back over 100 metres. I thought, that's impossible. I can't do that. There's just no way that I'm going to be able to achieve that. And actually, by setting himself these goals, actually blew himself away of what he was trying to achieve, and moved away from the sport for a while. But then he thought, I don't have to swim that time today or tomorrow or even this year. I've got 4 years to do it. That's 1 second a year of improvement. That's still a big ask to do. He used to train for 10 months of every year. That's 1/10 of a second in a month's training. Roughly 30 days in a month. So that's 1/300th of a second that he's looking for an improvement in a day. In a day's training, he would train 4 hours a day, every day. That's 1/1200th of a second. It takes an eye to blink 5/1200ths of a second. He's looking for 1/5 of an eye blink improvement to try and do in an hour's training. That's simple. Any of us can do something that's going to make us go 1/5 of an eye blink quicker. And that was his process of doing it, and then work towards his games. He did get selected, he did get part of the team, he did win the gold medal in that relay team, and he did make the final in the individual event, the men's 100 metres backstroke, where he was racing the 2 times Olympic champion, world record holder, Olympic record holder. He took the gold medal, and he took the gold medal in a time of 55.49 of a second. So almost, I thought, identical to what he set himself those targets for. I hope that's a true story. I've used it a lot. I've actually heard him tell the story as well, but that doesn't always mean it's totally true. But that doesn't mean that of whatever goals you're setting yourselves is that of making it into small chunks that work. When I retired, I set up my own charitable trust, and I said that I was going to try and raise £5 million for children's causes over 5 years. The number 5 keeps cropping up in my life. I wish it was 6 or 7 or 8, but maybe not with raising that sort of money, but in other areas. And I remember this story, and I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start of narrowing it down, of this big sum of money, of how we're going to do this. And we started looking at it and sort of designing it down and working out that I had to raise £20,000 a week, every week, for 5 years, and having 2 weeks off every year. Every time I saw a clock it was going to be ticking away at how much I was falling behind the target. So we actually developed it in a different way of setting up some big events and working towards that big event to raise a lot of money and breaking the back of this target from this point of view. So what worked in sport of rowing and swimming didn't work in trying to raise this money within charity. We did get to the target, we did achieve our dreams. We've gone on to raise about £7 million now over the years, and the fund is actually now being organised by Comic Relief, and I'm actually one of the trustees of Comic Relief. And that's pretty big boy stuff of sitting in the boardrooms there, of talking about millions of pounds and literally the difference between life and death of people around the world with the causes that we support from that point of view. But just sort of looking at different areas of what you think that, and you need to tailor make whatever your challenge is to make sure that you get to that dream and from achieving what you want to set out. It's easy to make a plan, it's easy to sort of put these things into process. It's always very difficult to follow that and I'll achieve it from that point of view. I could carry on, I've still got a number of things on my little cards that I could talk about, but I'm dying for a drink, and I think we're going to open it up to some question and answers now, so feel free to stick your hands up. I remember when I first came back from my first Olympics, is that I spoke at a ladies' hospice at the north of England, and I spoke for a couple of minutes about the sport and a little bit about our training and what we did, and said, is there any questions? And this little old lady stuck her hand up and said, did your wife knit your jumper? I wasn't married at the time, and it was a Marks and Spencer's jumper, so if we keep the questions on that sort of level, we'll go a long way. Has anybody got any questions? Last year's games, or the games that I think that the atmosphere, as I described earlier, was pretty special, but within my own sport of Catherine Granger, I've attempted 3 times to try and win a gold medal and came back with a silver medal each time. For her and her partner Anna to win that gold medal was pretty special for me, because obviously I know Catherine very well. She was competing at her first games when it was my last games, and our paths have crossed over a lot of times towards that. So that day of the 3rd of August was pretty special.
How do you think performance enhancing drugs are changing sport?
This might be a better question for my wife to answer, of being a doctor than myself. If you look back through history of sports, there's always been people that cheat. There's always sort of people that want to push the boundaries a little bit too far. You've got to allow boundaries to be pushed in certain directions, but of drug taking and cheating from that point of view is something that we need to try and stay above all the time. There's been a lot of people that are saying, well, why don't we just get rid of all the rules and allow people to do what they want to do? Well, for the athletes themselves, that's their choice. I'm a father of 3. 2 of my children do sport to a reasonable level. Would I want them to be taking drugs? The answer is no. It's about the image that you're giving across to the youth of the next generation coming through. And the more that we can say that we want to compete in a drug-free sport, the better it's going to be health-wise for all those people. So it's not about the human rights, and human rights is talked about a lot with drug-taking issues and things from that point of view. I think that my sport of rowing is reasonably clean. I won't say it's totally clean, but reasonably clean. If you look back at the East Germany, when I was a junior coming through, Junior World Championships, I lost the gold medal by 2 feet. One of them was a 16-year-old, the guy that I was rowing with, and myself were both 18-year-olds. We're thinking, this is impossible. We're actually competing at the men's level, open classes in that particular year. How can a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old beat us? That was a little bit of us being a little bit arrogant in some ways as well. That 16-year-old did go on and win another 2 junior gold medals. And then his year of coming out of juniors went straight to the senior team and won gold medal, and has won 2 gold medals at the single sculls at Olympic Games. So he's a pretty class athlete in his own right. But if you look back at the Stasi files, because one of the things that Germans are very good at are keeping documents. And there is a lot of evidence that drugs were being used. There was evidence that drugs were looked at within the sport of rowing through the 60s, and I'm sure they were developing all the time. But there's next to no evidence that their elite men and women's athletes were taking drugs. There's evidence that junior athletes were on their build-up, but once they got into the senior team, that wasn't the case. So if they were the dominant force at that time, and they were seen not to be taking drugs at that particular time, is that we felt that once we sort of got our minds in the right direction, that we could compete on a level without doing it. It was never an issue. Because of my inner belief that I felt that I was good enough to be world champion or Olympic champion, is that I was going to beat them of whatever they were taking. And I was hopefully going to do that as a clean athlete from that point of view. When you talk about sort of Lance Armstrong and the evidence that's been coming out recently, is that when I go around to people, and the question is asked quite a lot, is that is anybody shocked of Lance Armstrong being a dope tree? And everyone says, well, no, there's all sorts of rumours. Cycling went through a long stage of some drug issues within it. I think now that they've cleaned up their act, and it's very, very different now, but there is that history towards the sport. And so I think people are shocked of the degree and the bullying that went in towards with Lance and that situation. But it's something that, as exports people, of having a say, that we don't want this to happen, and trying to keep sports as clean as we possibly can. I don't think we'll ever achieve it. If we work towards that goal, then that's got to be a good thing, not a bad thing.
I wanted to know, in the lead up to Sydney, how did you manage your training as hard as you do, and diabetes at the same time?
Yeah, I came down with diabetes 3 years before the Sydney Games, and that really did throw a spanner in the works. I used to pride myself on consistency of performance, so through every training session, Matthew and I, when we were racing and training with each other, we used to say that we were ready any day to race our opposition, even if we were our most exhausted of a training session. Line us up, we'll still race you. Once I came down with the condition of diabetes, as the consistency got knocked out of it, and some days you'd wake up and I'd feel absolutely fine, and we were doing a set rowing machine test, 2K test, and thinking, well, yeah, I could break a world record today, I feel that good, and then get onto the rowing machine, and halfway through it is to just run out of energy. It'd be like a light switch being turned from on to being off. It wasn't your sort of fatigue element of where you sort of know you're running out of energy. Those of you who have been on a rowing machine and doing those set tests, is that that fatigue sets in a lot earlier than actually a time before you actually stop. You know it's going to hurt at some stage. Well, this was literally a light switch of energy, and so consistency was out of the window. I always felt that if I could get through to being selected of getting to the games, I felt that racing over 2,000 metres with diabetes wasn't going to be too much of an issue. But it was the problem of doing 4 training sessions a day, of being able to get the energy in to be able to do the training that needs to be done to be able to compete there. So where people sort of see it as what it was like racing in Sydney, or of the races leading up to that, that wasn't so much of a problem. The problem was on training camps, when you're doing 4 sessions a day for 2 days, and then 2 sessions the third day, and having the afternoon off. That afternoon off was really sort of restoring up the energy, so you could knacker yourself off again the next day, and hopefully hang on for the middle day before you got your rest day again. Really very difficult, and very difficult mentally as well. I think if I was at the beginning of my career, I think it would have been too much for me, and I would have stopped. But I think that my mental strength, as my physique wasn't as strong as it was getting to, I think the mental strength was stronger, and very stubborn. My wife will agree that I'm a very stubborn person, that I wasn't going to see it happening. When I was diagnosed, is that we went away on a training camp to South Africa. It was land-based, cycling in the gym, weights and ergos, and there was about 16 of us, 16 of the men's team, and each training session I was doing was proving that I wasn't the same athlete as I was before. And it was getting worse and worse, and it'd been well documented that Anne wanted me to retire after Atlanta, and I decided that I wanted to carry on, and came up with a story that we had a family vote for it, and my young girls voted for me to carry on and not, all make-believe in my own mind. Of being the team doctor at that time and wasn't on that camp, and I got back from one of the training sessions of half an hour behind everybody else on bikes, and just sort of the lowest point I'd got to. And I phoned home and said that I'm coming home, I'm packing my bag and coming home. And I was really quite shocked that the response I got from Anne was the complete opposite, is that we're in this together, we'll find a way of getting through to get through this issue. It took a very long period of months before we started to get to grips with the issues, but we did get there in the end. It wasn't easy. The day that I was diagnosed by my GP, I was sent up to see the diabetic specialist in my area. Now, I'm very, very lucky. I tell people it's always about being lucky than being a great athlete, and I think I've been quite lucky throughout my career, is that if I'd been sent to a diabetic centre probably anywhere else in the country, they would have told me that I couldn't do what I was doing. I had a grandfather that had diabetes in his late 60s, early 70s, didn't survive much longer than that. And so I knew a little bit about it, and I felt that you couldn't be an elite athlete with this condition. And I was with Ian Gallen for 3 hours, teaching me how to take insulin, what my lifestyle was going to be, change of diet, all this sort of thing. Loads of information that was being stuffed down your neck at that time. It's difficult to take it all on. And at the end of it, he says, I can't see any reason why you can't achieve your dreams in competing in the Sydney Games in 3 years' time. I wasn't expecting to be told that. And for his enthusiasm sort of rubbed off, and well, if he thinks I can do it, I'll give it my best shot. He did say it was going to be difficult, and he was certainly right about that. He has now become the leading consultant within diabetes and sport, and has all sorts of athletes from around the world doing amazing things, from rowing the Atlantic to rugby league and union players, marathon runners, all sorts of different people that are achieving very high things within sport with a condition of diabetes. So in some ways I see as a little bit of a blaze trail in some ways of changing the views of people. But the attitude, because of Ian's attitude, was about that diabetes had to live with me, not me live with diabetes, and that's the way that I go about it. So it doesn't stop me do the things that I want to do. Yes, I wouldn't be able to become a commercial airline pilot. I wouldn't be able to fight on the front line within forces, but funny enough, I don't want to do that anyway. So it wasn't really an issue to me. So all the things I wanted to do, it's never stopped me doing it.
From all of your victories, is there one that's sweetest?
You may be a little bit surprised with this, but yes, there is, and it's not the Olympic ones. I always wanted to be a single sculler. I wanted to try and win a gold medal, and my 17-year-old, as I was looking through of potentially being an Olympian, is that I thought I might be able to get to 3 Olympics. Moscow as an 18-year-old, which I didn't get there. Los Angeles, maybe in the final, maybe pinch a medal, and then in the single sculls in Seoul in '88 was going to be the one that I win the single sculls title. It never worked for me. I never got the results that I felt I was capable of and actually achieved, and I'm diverted to start rowing and carry on rowing, where I won my first Olympic gold medal in '84. And the closest I got to it was racing at Henley Royal Regatta in the Diamond Sculls, the single sculls event, and I was racing a lightweight, and the lightweight beat me, which I wasn't very happy about. He was reigning world champion at the time, but that still doesn't help. But by that stage, I'd already committed myself to row and not scull, and that was going to be the last event I did. I did get selected to go to the Commonwealth Games a few weeks later, and I became Commonwealth single sculls champion. And I'm very proud of that. I did make a big breakthrough in my own performance in that particular series of races, and felt that potentially I could go on and win medals in the single. But by that stage, I'd committed myself to row back with Andy Holmes. The guy that actually got the bronze medal at that race, Eric Verdonk from New Zealand, went on to be a bronze medalist at the Olympic Games in Seoul. So I think I've beaten him once. Perhaps I could have beaten him again and been in front of the other two as well. So my path went very differently from that point of view. And I suppose as the years go on, it probably means more, because I'm still Commonwealth single sculls champion. All my other titles have gone, only because we haven't had rowing in the Commonwealth Games since then. But it's still pretty special. Rowing with Matt Pinson, who's 8 years younger than me, he always classed as the Commonwealth Games as being a bit of a pot hunt. But if you look at the top rowing nations now, New Zealand, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, it wasn't quite at that level then, but I can exaggerate it was a very high level now. Anybody else? Back.
Who is the sports person that most impressed you that you've met?
I've been fortunate to meet a lot of people over the years. I mentioned Mark Spitz earlier. Sometimes it's not always best to meet your heroes, and Mark sort of comes into that category. I've actually know him extremely well now. We get on very well indeed. But I think of being very much sort of the American background of winning's everything and there's nothing else involved in that, is that when I first met him, his attitude was very much along those sort of lines. A couple of years ago, we did a bit of filming together. It was 4 great athletes talking about their Olympic success, all multiple medals at the Olympic Games. And then we were asked the question of, not including yourselves, who do you think is the best Olympian? And Mark, unfortunately, was the first person from his point of view, so he didn't have a chance to think about it, and he couldn't answer the question. He wouldn't come up with a name. And then when it came round to me, who was last, I said, well, it's actually the guy sitting over there, Mark Spitz, of winning 7 gold medals at 1 Games, 12 in total. I just think that was incredible. And it wasn't until after the programme, off air, that he came up to me and he said, I should have said you. Somebody that's won 5 consecutive gold medals, it should have been me. That's very much Mark, is that great respect, but respect in his way, and not from that. But of what he did was pretty special. And I was 10 when he did that. My son was 10 when Michael Phelps beat that and won 8. And I always felt that my son, that may be the trigger. It triggered me into sport. Perhaps that'll be the trigger that will get my son into sport. He's getting there slowly. He's 15 on Saturday, plays rugby to a reasonable level, and starting to get into basketball now. Of what was my hero, Mark Spitz, I thought that Michael may be his hero, but it wasn't. It was Usain Bolt. Zach was with us at the Beijing Games, and I was fortunate enough to get them into the men's 100 metres final, and he just thought that was absolutely incredible. But a few hours afterwards, he was back in his own little world, and sport wasn't meaning a great to him. Now, as a 15-year-old, or nearly 15-year-old, it's starting to mean a little bit more to him. So I still may get him yet. My eldest daughter is quite sporty. She's done a little bit of rowing since she's been at university. She did do the Oxford and Cambridge women's boat race after very little training and won it. Gone back to a previous sport of netball, did the varsity netball match last year and won it. And they've got their varsity netball match not this Sunday but the following Sunday. It's away from home, so see if she can repeat it again. But she's more interested in her medicine than she is on the sporting side. So I don't think that she'll be going down the avenues of trying to get to Olympic Games. But never say never, she may do it. But as a parent with your children, you want the best for them. If that's within sport, their chosen area, and just have a happy, successful life. And so I hope that that'll be the case. But it'd be nice if they went to games as well. It's a pretty tough area to follow with having both your parents competing at that sort of level.
One of you come up to the start and felt the least prepared?
A few times. More mentally unprepared than physically unprepared. The sports psychologists will talk about control the controllables. So of getting to games, competing at the highest level, is that there's no excuse for not doing the right training, the right preparation for that. That mentally you can be in a very different place. Another one of my heroes within the sport of rowing in the UK was a guy called Tim Crooks, a bit of a legend from my sort of era, a few years older than myself. Got a silver medal at the Montreal Games, and did a single scull, so it was a bit crazy as well. So sort of a number of things that sort of rubbed off on me from him. And I raced him at Marlow Regatta, and I was worried, so worried about racing him, even though he'd been retired a few years, but he was still pretty fit. And I didn't sleep a week, the whole night. Now, athletes will talk about of they didn't have a very good night's sleep and this, and this was quite a turning point from that point of view, because I used to worry about not getting enough sleep. Your body's a pretty impressive machine, really. If it needs sleep, it will use it. If it doesn't, adrenaline can keep pumping, you can still perform at a very high level. So sleep should not, in my view, again, my wife will disagree with me, because I know there's a lot of sleep issues that are going on within the team at the moment, with discussions around that area. And I literally didn't sleep at all that night. Got onto the start line, won convincingly. Raced him 2 weeks later at Henley Royal Regatta in the final of the Diamond Sculls. And thinking, well, stuffed him 2 weeks ago. It's a non-entity. He was actually doubling up, and he got to 2 finals and chose to do the other final first, because he had a better chance of winning in the other event than racing me. He did win that gold medal in that other event, and then when we raced, I went off to an early start, and then where I just gradually moved away from him before, it just stuck the same distance, right the way up. And then saying that he's a little bit of a nutter. Most people in the sport of rowing will put sort of 10 or 20 big strokes in at some time in a race. During the 70s and 80s, there used to be sort of areas where you really sort of put a big effort in. He said he closed his eyes and burnt for 50. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in front. I remember just sort of looking at my coach in the launch behind and thinking, what can I do? Just there's nothing I can do. And then I just sort of sensed him sort of falter slightly, and he was about 3/4 of the length in front of me at this stage. And I felt that I was sort of, I could make a comeback. This is coming to the closing stages of the race. And was able to sort of get up level with him. As I got up level with him, he just stopped. And I remember sort of just moving out in front of me. People said that I stopped as well. I said I paddled very, very, very light. And it looked like I'd stopped, but I don't think I had. And I remember him sort of leaned over his oars, and I could see his face underneath his armpit. And then suddenly he saw me, and thought he'd stopped as well, jumped up and started going again. Thinking, oh, God. So mentally, I think you could be in the wrong place. There's no excuse for physically being in the wrong place, because that's in your own hands, is what I say. Sports psychologists control the controllables. You can be the best athlete you can. That may not win you the race, but you're in control of that. Within the sport of rowing, we seem to get paranoid about the conditions. If it's a headwind, crosswind, or whatever, going down to regatta courses is that you're looking at the flags of which way they're going and trying to work out, before you even get to the venue, of where the wind's going to be blowing. Matthew and I came up with a theory, is that whatever the conditions were was just what we wanted. A lot of people didn't like racing us when it was a headwind. I used to hate headwind because the race took longer. But our opposition used to sort of think they were going to lose by more because it was a headwind. It was funny, when the wind turned around the other way, they got a spring in their step. They felt they had a chance. No, they didn't. They actually rowed better because they felt they had a better chance and pushed us harder from that point of view. So again, it's more mental problems than that. Control the controllables. The wind will do whatever it's doing. Get on and do it.
Where would you see yourself today heading off rowing?
Very very good question. Of leaving school with one grade 1 CSE in woodwork, that university wasn't really an option for me, and it seems a bit odd now that I've got 13 honorary doctorates around the UK. They see something in me that I was capable of doing at that particular time. My father was a builder, had a small building company. He always wanted me to take over the business when he come up to retirement. The thing is that he retired before I gave up playing about in a boat, so there wasn't really an option for me to take the family business from that point of view. Sporting wise, I think I probably would have played rugby, but I don't know what sort of level I would have got to. I would like to think I would have got to the highest level, but when you're an elite athlete in another sport, you can think that now, but at the time, I don't think that it depends on the breaks that you have as you go through. That I was a very explosive athlete. I was a very quick sprinter in rowing terms, and I could go off the start really quickly and blast past people in the closing stages. What I wasn't very good at keeping the endurance side up, and I had to have a rest in the middle. And it wasn't until I started training more endurance-wise that I started getting results, and that I think I always needed good results to motivate myself to keep going. If I was in a sport that I found that harder to get those results, I may have got bored and gone off in a different direction. I don't know. So that's probably the sport that I probably would have done. I would have quite liked to have been a golfer, even though that I hate travelling and living out in a suitcase, and that's what golfers do nowadays. But the money's not bad.
How did you finance yourself through all the hard years when you were a teenager in your early 20s when you weren't really winning?
My parents were very much working class. My mother taught herself, after teaching her 3 kids how to drive, and I was the youngest of those 3. She taught herself to become a driving instructor and earn money from that point of view to help me carry on my sports. Then I was fortunate enough of marrying somebody that was a doctor that potentially could bring in an income. I say potentially, because she wanted to be an international athlete in her own right as well. There was an organisation, there still is an organisation called the Sports Aid Foundation. They give out grants in those days to quite elite athletes, because there wasn't the funding programs in the UK as there is now, and so we used to do reasonably well out of that organisation. I was on there. Matthew and I were on their top grant, which was £5,000 at that time. My first ever grant was £36. The grant that I had to go to the Los Angeles Games was £300. So Matthew will say again, he says that was a lot of money in those days, but it wasn't. So no, it's been tough.
What did you like most and least about training?
I used to hate the boredom of doing the same things day in, day out. And when I stopped eventually, I was looking forward to doing lots of different things. Probably doing lots of different things badly, but that's what I was looking forward to. Now, what I missed with my life is the routine of what I was doing before. Each day is different. Some really good days, some fun, different things. But actually, in some ways, there's quite a lot to be said for a 9-to-5 job, of knowing where you are, what you're doing, when you've got time free, of organising from that point of view. My life now is still pretty haphazard. Now with the London Games behind us, is that I'm trying to get a little bit more normality behind it. And the reality, what goes around comes around, as Jürgen Grover used to say. Training-wise, if you've got stiff from training, go out and train, because you'll get rid of your stiffness by doing that. And my parents used to run around take me around to domestic regattas, and now we tend to be doing that. I've just got the eye. Anne does it more than I do, but become a glorified taxi, and that's what we are. You may have some medals behind you, but at the end of the day is that you're casting your kids around to different events. Fortunately, 2 of them can drive now, and sometimes we twist their arm to take the youngest one to different things, but it doesn't happen very often. It's funny, they don't come home very often now.
We just have time for one more question, I think.
I asked Matthew Prince about Twitter, but I should ask, I'll get a good story.
And what did he come up with? And how much money he owes me when we play golf with each other?
He said to ask me hiding behind the island and Princess Anne's car in '88.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Two stories. Behind around the island was one of the stories I was going to tell. The training that we did was very methodical. It's very boring, very tedious in some ways of what you have to do. Is that having those gold medal times that I talked about is that we achieved the gold medal time the year before the Barcelona Games and then won the gold medal. We won that gold medal by 5 seconds at those games. And then our evaluated new gold time that was working towards for Atlanta was 4 seconds quicker. Got 4 years of hard graft. Keeping your motivation, keeping it, the process of working towards that is really difficult. 3 years out, even 2 years out. The closer it gets, the easier it is in some ways. It's about seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. And so what we found ourselves is that some of our training sessions is that when Jürgen wasn't following us because he would come out in coaching launch now and again, most of the time be cycling up and down on his bike, monitoring each 250 metres of what time we're doing, if we're paddling light, set pieces or whatever. So the times that he didn't come out with us is that we found ourselves hiding behind the island. We'd be looking at our watches thinking, well, that if he comes out of his office, he'll be expecting to see us, so off we'll go. Now, Henley, where we trained, was at the men's Olympic Centre for men's rowing. And their 2 Olympic champions are being seen to be hiding around the island. You can see people thinking, what are they doing? Is that the way you become an Olympic champion? We went to the World Championships that year and we had one of the hardest races that we ever had together. Is that we were favourites to win. It was in Prague, in Czech. And the Belgians went out to a very early lead. A bit surprised really, we weren't expecting them to go off as hard as they did. Being favourites, you've got to cover everyone's move. You don't have to lead, but you've got to make sure that they don't have enough that they can have a little bit, sort of take the foot off the grass, be able to catch their breath and be able to respond to it again. So we sort of covered it, we were about half a length down on them. And then as they faded back into the distance, and I think they finished last, is that the Germans then pushed really hard and we just managed to stay in front of them in the closing stages. As we crossed the line, the first words that Matthew mentioned to me, and this was the 4th time that I'd become world champion, it was the 2nd time that Matthew had become world champion, and he turned around to me and he said, we're never ever going to hide behind that island again. Totally true story, and from that day we never hid behind that island. Sometimes we used to go through Henley Bridge and there's a nice little inlet in there, we hid in there a few times. We never hid behind that island again. What was the other story?
The Princess Anne.
Oh, the Princess Anne, of the Seoul Games in '88, is that Andy Holmes and I made the final in Dan Cox's pairs. On the warm-up for the final in the Cox's pairs is that Belgium. Why is it the Belgians? The Belgians broke a foot stretcher, and we all got onto the state boats ready to start the race, and they showed that there was a problem. They were allowed to replace it, but they had to send somebody back to the boating area. So they allowed everyone to be released from the start blocks. Actually started the single sculls race off before us, which would have been following us. And the Princess Anne was going to follow our race. And so we decided, Andy and I decided not to paddle all the way back down to the boating area. We thought that was crazy because the time that they would do it was a waste of energy. So we went to the side, got out of a boat, and there was this car with the doors open. So we went and sat in the car. Andy sat in the front, I laid flat out in the back, and stayed there for a few minutes, and then we got a little knock on the window from one of the sides, and said, "This is the Princess Royal's car. Do you mind if we can have it back, please?" And she got out and was waiting for our start. She got into the start area and seeing some of the officials. Now, I did a fundraising tour with the Princess Royal towards the Atlanta Games, and had to speak at a couple of lunches and dinners, and I told this story. and she didn't know of the story. So it's totally true. Our sweaty bodies were sort of sprawled about in her royal car. She didn't actually watch our race. She followed the single sculls race down, but then awarded us our gold medals as we raced down from that. So quite a nice story.
Well, I'm afraid that is all we have time for, but I'd just like to thank on behalf of the Phil, Sir Steve and Lady Anne for coming out here and answering all our questions. And we're really proud to have you as our honorary patron of the Phil. It's no more than worthy recipient, a true sporting legend of the gold medal. So if I could just ask everybody to stay in their seats while Andrew escorts you and Lady Anne out. We'll have a final party round of applause.
I've only just sat down.